Undead and Married is a romantic vampire cozy mystery and is book one in Andy Lowe's Blood Bond Agency series. The series is published by Squabbling Sparrows Press and is also available in ebook and paperback.
Chapter 24. Eva slid the bolts to the side and unlocked the door, opening it wide. She was expecting to see a mirror image of her room, but nothing could be further from the truth. For a start, her room wasn't full of a multitude of gorgeous dresses and wigs of every hue. The differences didn't stop there. Piled high on the dressing table, sitting opposite the end of the king-size bed, was makeup that looked to be commercial quality. Wow, Dominik wasn't kidding when he said Eva's own grandmother wouldn't recognize her after Magda had had her way. And speaking of the woman, Eva's mouth dropped open when she took in Dominik's cousin. It was a good thing he'd explained his cousin was happily married. Without that and the man standing right behind the gorgeous blonde, Eva would be mid-flight by now, fangs bared. That Magda took a step backward and plastered herself against her husband's side said some of this must still show in Eva's face. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what's wrong with me. Eva moved forward, extending her hand in friendship. She was relieved when Magda grasped it with both of hers, squeezing it gently. This is fine. I was the same way with Luca, at the beginning. She smiled over her shoulder at her husband before turning back to Eva and looking at her appraising ly. Oh no, we're not. Eva waved her hands frantically between herself and Dominik. I'm sure he's explained about the family connection. More frantic hand-waving ensued, with none of it doing anything to change the speculation on Magda's face. Perhaps more disconcerting was the look Dominik gave her, which had a good deal of speculation about it too. Luca broke the tension in the room. Right, we'll leave you ladies to it. He kissed his wife lightly on the lips before straightening. Let me know when you're ready to go. Eva watched wide-eyed as he and Dominik left, closing the door quietly behind them. What was that? Magda's laughter told Eva she'd said this aloud. We are blood bonded. Surely you have seen this before? No. Not exactly like that. But your parents? I hear theirs is such a match. Surely. Eva thought about it. She'd never seen energy thrumming between her parents like she witnessed between Magda and Luca. It wasn't like this with her parents, with them not so much in love as besotted with each other. Sure, they only have eyes for each other, but I've never seen the energy swirling like that. You could actually see it, rather than sense it? The question had Eva going all Mona Lisa on Dominik's cousin, unwilling to go into any more details. This was the first time she'd met the woman. She wasn't handing over all the family secrets so easily. As if realizing Eva wasn't saying anything else, Magda bustled about, sorting through her supplies of makeup. Only when she was ready did she pat the chair sitting in front of the dressing table with its large mirror. 2 hours later, Eva stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror on the back of the bathroom door. If she wasn't looking through her own eyes, she would have been sure she was dreaming. Magda was a magician. And all achieved without Eva having to shave her head or let Lilith loose with the hair dye. Instead, Magda had tucked Eva's silver tresses under a cap and secured them in place with hair clips. Even the shape of Eva's face had changed because of careful shading. Dark contact lenses transformed her eyes to a muddy green, rather than their usual silver. However, it was the lustrous auburn wig that made the biggest difference. Eva then looked down at her chest and decided her hair wasn't the biggest change after all. Thanks to some silicone fillets and a booster bra, she'd doubled in size in that department. And the ruby silk dress did nothing to hide her new assets. Wouldn't she be better off fading into the background? There was a light knock at the bathroom door, and it swung open before she was given a chance to say, "Enter." Perfect, declared Magda. Perfect. Aren't these Eva waved her hands around her chest area. A little much? The last thing I want to do is draw attention. Magda stood with hands on hips and glared at Eva. No, that is exactly what you should do. If you sneak around in the shadows, people will know you are hiding something. Eva squeaked in alarm when Dominik moved to stand next to his cousin. She's right. If you go in looking like this, no one will see you as anything other than what you appear to be. If Eva thought her transformation was exceptional, it was nothing compared to Dominik's. Dressed in what looked to be a bespoke tuxedo, the subtle sheen of the fabric caught the light with his every move. The guy oozed confidence and sexual magnetism, with Eva yet again bemoaning him as being firmly off her dating radar. And if that weren't depressing enough, after all this was over and the Chronicle recovered, she had to find him a wife. On seeing how dilated his pupils were, Eva was ready to slam the bathroom door in his face when her attention was drawn by Magda's delighted laughter. Dominik joined Eva in staring at the woman. "Cousin, do you want to let us know what's so funny?" Rather than answer him, Magda continued laughing, leaving both Eva and Dominik in the dark about what she found so amusing. It wasn't until there was a full-length black velvet cape draped around Eva's shoulders and they were walking down the hotel hallway that Magda said anything further. And even then, it was to her husband, and Eva wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. What did the woman mean by, "she can see it with others, but not herself"? It was the first time Eva had seen Sebastian's place at night, and she was impressed despite her loathing for the owner. The lighting design must have cost a fortune, with the large, mostly glass dwelling lit up and sparkling like a jewel box. Equally impressive was the lineup of cars making their way slowly down the driveway, spilling their equally flashy occupants out under the portico. Despite knowing she would fit in, at least so far as her appearance went, Eva would rather be anywhere but here. If it weren't for her ability to sense the Chronicle was still where it was earlier in the week, she would tell Dominik to get them out of there. As it was, she had no option but to go through with this. There was no going back for her, with life as she knew it on hold. Dominik slowed to a halt next to the stairs leading to large double front doors. Eva turned away from them to see if he was as keyed up about their evening as she was. Outwardly, he appeared relaxed, but at an energetic level, he was on edge. Strange, she wouldn't have taken him as the nervous type. "Eva, we'll be fine. We'll be in and out before Sebastian knows what's going on." She had to admire his confidence. It wasn't something she shared. Perhaps this was because she knew the exact location of the Chronicle, and that retrieving it wouldn't be easy. She was about to give him more details when a young vampire in an ill-fitting suit opened her door. He backed up, gesturing to the front doors, meaning there was nothing for it but for Eva to exit the car and enter the home of her nemesis. Of some comfort was that Dominik was hard against her side, his arm tucked around her waist protectively. Or was that possessively? Either way, she was glad of it. They weren't even close to the front doors when the smell of blood hit them, and Eva had to fight the urge to gag. For it to be this strong, the vampires inside must have drained people. Could it be they would have another murder on their hands tonight? Perhaps more than one. If not for Dominik's stabilizing influence, Eva would have tripped over the mat inside the front doors. "Careful, my love." Eva gulped, although this time it had nothing to do with them walking into a potential murder scene. It didn't matter that she knew they would masquerade as a couple. Hearing his endearment tore at her heart. Inside, Eva faced having to hand her cloak over to the vampire manning the coat check. After she undid the clasp at her neck, Dominik took it gently off her shoulders, his breath caressing the back of her neck. Her cloak handed over, she felt as good as naked in the slim-fitting silk sheath that Magda had deemed appropriate, with her plucking at it nervously. "Relax, Taha Zemran. You are gorgeous." Eva would be okay if his performance wasn't as convincing as it was, but hearing his endearment in the old language did a number on her. It would be so easy to accept this as real, that they were mates, and yet make-believe was all they would ever be. She couldn't afford to forget this. It was a mantra she kept repeating until her sense of equilibrium returned, and she was ready to face the enemy. Only there was no sign of Sebastian. And neither did anyone seem to know where he was, be they a guest or hired help. Eva couldn't decide if this was a cause for celebration or not. It would be better if they knew where he was, with Eva bemoaning the fact she couldn't sense the odious man in the same way she could the Chronicle. Despite this, they moved around, acting as if they owned the place, drinks in hands, ready laughter on their lips. As the night progressed, this charade became harder to maintain. When they came across half a dozen nouveaux sang, making a meal out of a young human, it became impossible. What was strange was there'd been no need to discuss their plan. Rather, they'd combined their energy and blasted the young men, leaving them in heaps around the room. Unable to contain her surprise, she turned to Dominik to see what he had made of it. Likewise, he appeared as shocked as her. To the point, he nudged one man with the toe of his designer dress shoe. There was no response. That was unexpected. While she knew they were both strong, was it strong enough to take out 6 vampires who'd so recently fed? She didn't think so. Has that ever happened before? After shoving 2 of the men off what had been their meal, Dominik shook his head. The girl was a mess, her body ravaged, but her heart beat valiantly on. It was enough for Eva and Dominik to work with. After Dominik licked the wounds on her neck, they'd healed rapidly. Again, they joined forces to pool their energy, but this time it healed rather than hurt. And again, their combined energy was so much more than the sum of its parts. Despite this, it took longer than it should for clarity to return to the young woman's eyes, and for her to take in the unconscious forms at her feet. Quicker was Dominik bundling her out the nearest window, and telling her to get the hell out of there. She didn't need to be asked twice, disappearing into the bushes around the house as fast as her shaky legs could carry her. If it weren't for the Chronicle being tantalizingly close, Eva would have escorted her to the front gate or even given her a ride back into town. As it was, she had no choice but to march along the hallway and down the stairs at the end, glad of Dominik's presence. Upon opening the door at the bottom, Eva stopped where she was. It was a basement car park, and not what she was expecting. Why would that idiot Sebastian keep a priceless artifact down here? Perhaps because this was the last place anyone would look? Dominik whistled as he took in the vehicles parked in front of them. That's strange. What is? She found nothing strange about Sebastian bolstering his manhood with high-end European autos. It was exactly what she would expect from him. I wouldn't have thought Sebastian could afford one of these, let alone 7 in different colors. Dominik walked back and forth, checking out the vehicles. His rates aren't steep enough to fund this lot. Dominik, talking so casually about Love Bites hookups, made her system flood with jealousy. Only when the veil of red was under her control did she join him in staring at the cars. And that raises the question of what else he's up to. Eva was determined to find out what, but only after she retrieved the Chronicle. And all going well, that wouldn't take long. After closing her eyes, Eva held her hands out. In her mind's eye, she could sense the Chronicle at an energetic level and knew which direction to walk in. In the end, she kept her eyes shut, with Dominik guiding her safely between the flashy cars. Not until she knew the Chronicle was right in front of her did Eva open her eyes. Rather than be facing a doorway as expected, she was confronted with a solid stone wall. The bedrock they had built the house on. Surely that monster hadn't interred it? Not even he would be that stupid, would he? She stepped forward and laid her hands flat on the icy surface. They were immediately warmed by the Chronicle on the other side of this one last obstacle. Now all they needed to do was work out how to get through a foot of solid rock. Chapter 25. Eva stared at the rock face in front of her, only noting her surroundings when Dominik moved behind her and laid his hands next to hers. It was something that had his energy enveloping her in a warm hug. It's through here? Eva wasn't sure if he was asking her or telling her. Then sanity returned. Only the De Silvas could sense the Chronicle. And he wasn't a De Silva. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it's on the other side of at least a foot of solid rock. Dominik took his hands away from the wall, resting them on her hips. Unable to stay upright, Eva leaned back against his powerful frame. Her equilibrium then took a further battering when he dropped a chaste kiss on her right shoulder. There was nothing chaste about her response, with her then swamped with shame. He was her cousin. She shouldn't be reacting to him like this. It was sick. The speed with which Dominik settled her on her feet and then stepped away from her said that he agreed. Him having to clear his throat before speaking also wasn't a good sign. We need to head back upstairs and approach it from the other side. I doubt Sebastian can manipulate solid granite. It has to be a subterranean cavern. We just need to find a way in. He had a point because despite walking the length of the rock wall, there weren't any entrances Eva could sense. If there were, the energy would have been stronger there. Instead, the Chronicle's signature stayed constant throughout her exploration. Dominik slung his arm around her shoulders and gave her a brotherly squeeze. Come. Let's get this over and done with. Turning, they made their way back through the garage and up the stairs. Of the young vampires they had incapacitated earlier, there was no sign. A quick search with her senses, and Eva couldn't pick up on the young girl's energy signature either. With luck, she would have made it out the front gates, and they could collect her on their way home. Once upstairs, they mixed and mingled the length of the house, until Eva knew the Chronicle was directly under her feet. There was only one problem, and that was the two guards that stood on either side of the doorway at the end of the hallway they'd entered. Surely this had to be the entrance to the cavern housing the Chronicle. This wasn't the biggest surprise for Eva. Dominik swung her around and into a tight embrace, his mouth hard against the side of her neck, although he went no further. Her immediate response was to struggle, although this soon abated, and she melted into his side, even welcoming his bite. Shush shush shush. It's only for show. Better they think we're lost. Okay, this Eva could deal with, even if part of her was disappointed. She would examine her emotions later, when it was safe to do so. Sorry. Eva tilted her head to the side in a submissive pose, unlike any she'd ever assumed before. She'd never wanted to. But it was all for show, right? Dominik's mouth moved slowly up the column of her neck before his lips brushed her earlobe, his energy dancing around her body like fireflies, leaving her shaky. She could hear his shallow breathing and his inarticulate murmurs as his lips brushed against her skin. His cologne mixed with his natural musk overwhelmed her senses, sending shivers down her spine. If this was how it was when he was pretending, what would it be like if he were playing for keeps? His husky, slow, or full-on didn't help her composure. What? Was he talking about them and the guards, or him and her? Thoughts of the latter flashed through her mind in a kaleidoscope of passion. Her answer, when it came, was a faltered, full-on, with it a toss-up what she was referring to. Dominik lifted his head and laughed loudly. Come, let's find somewhere private. As he led Eva down the hallway toward the guards, he kept in character, weaving slightly and even bumping into the wall as if drunk with blood and power. Eva followed him both literally and in style, giggling in a manner that was foreign to her. As a tactic, it worked. During one blood-drunk spin, Eva saw the guards smiling at their playfulness. Ha, it was working. Typical that Sebastian would cheap out on his security. Dominik and Eva then kept their eyes locked on each other, ignoring the two guards until they were right in front of them. Only then did the smiles on the uniformed pair falter, as if finally realizing not all was well. As before, Dominik and Eva combined their raw power, with it flaring, before fanning out around them. Of some concern was that it wasn't as strong as it had been upstairs when they'd used it to save the young woman. However, it was enough, with them hitting the guards with a solid wall of white noise, the pair collapsing in a boneless heap. They wouldn't be bothering Eva or Dominik for a while. However, they couldn't leave them lying out there where anyone could trip over them. Fortunately, there was another doorway a little way back up the hall where they dragged the two unconscious vampires. It was a small storage room with no lock on the door, but then they didn't plan on being in Sebastian's house for any longer than necessary. They would be long gone before the guards regained consciousness. Back in front of the unguarded door, Eva grabbed the doorknob and turned it. She was expecting it to be locked, but it turned and immediately she was on edge. It shouldn't have been this easy, should it? Dominik put his hand atop hers, telling her he shared her misgivings. This didn't stop her from swinging the door inward to reveal that the hallway continued for a few feet more, before they were again faced with a staircase. This time, Eva knew they wouldn't end up in an underground car park. Her feet were zinging with the energy from the Chronicle beneath them. After traversing the short hallway, a half-flight of stairs came into view. Eva was expecting this at a subconscious level. She knew they would have to retrace their steps in some fashion, simply because of where the Chronicle was located. Eva slipped out of her ruby stilettos and tucked them to one side. If they had to leave here in a hurry, she would rather not trip. And if she couldn't collect the shoes on her way out, she would buy Magda a replacement pair. It was with relief that she wiggled her toes in the lush carpet before following Dominik slowly down to the first landing. Safely there, he peered around the corner of the stairs. A simple thumbs up and he moved on, with Eva right behind. There was another hallway with a door at the end. This was odd. Eva thought the thick carpet would have ended. In her experience, subterranean caverns weren't carpeted, lushly or otherwise. Rubber matting perhaps, but that would be it. They inched forward until they stood directly in front of a door that was anything but vault-like. Instead of unadorned metal, the door was upholstered in black leather, complete with studs spelling out a flourished S. Surely not. Eva put her ear to the door, fully expecting to hear snoring. What she heard made her scalp crawl. There was a woman's laughter, with its earthy timbre telling Eva she was human rather than a vampire. Without taking her ear away from the door, she pointed rapidly at it, and Dominik laid his cheek against the soft leather facing her. His eyes also widened at the laughter within. However, they darkened when the mirth turned to screams and gurgles, with silence following soon after. Were they too late this time? Eva hoped not, although she didn't have as much energy to spare as earlier in the evening. If they couldn't help the woman the old-fashioned way, they could at least take her to the emergency room. Eva straightened and reached for the door handle, only to find Dominik's hand already upon it. He swung the door inward and Eva readied herself for the bloodbath they would face, whereas nothing could be further from the truth. At first glance, Sebastian was tucked up in bed with a willing companion. Only upon closer inspection did they realize he was in a blood coma and the young woman tucked up next to him was very dead. Was she to be yet another victim to be blamed on the blood bond agency, and Eva in particular? A quick glance at Dominik showed he wasn't as shocked as she was. He leaned over, allowing him to whisper in her ear. "Is the Chronicle in here?" Eva nodded, not once taking her eyes off the couple in the enormous bed, their forms illuminated by the multitude of candles dotted around the sumptuous room. There was nothing cavern-like about Sebastian's sleeping chamber. It was as try-hard as the man himself. More stage-set than bedroom, and obviously designed to impress. Personally, Eva thought it was crass in the extreme. Eva turned her head, her lips accidentally brushing against Dominik's. It felt as if she'd been sucker-punched. Her words when she spoke were husky and soft. "It's under the bed." Likewise, Dominik appeared to be having trouble getting air into his lungs. "You grab it and if he moves, I'll deal with him." Not willing to get Magda's dress dirty, Eva hitched it up to one side, now glad of the thigh-high split. At least this way, she could scramble around under the bed without tearing the delicate fabric. She was half under the bed when she sensed movement above her. She knew it wouldn't be the poor girl, rather Sebastian coming out of his blood coma. She wasn't surprised he had done this to himself, sensing not a spark of life in the girl. He drained her down to the last millimeter, the greedy pig. Eva stilled. No, this wasn't about greed, this was about power, about the odious man bolstering his flagging ego. This was an even sadder reason for the young woman to die, as had others before her. Eva shook her head slowly before reaching out and grabbing the Chronicle, relieved to find it was still locked and that Sebastian hadn't read its contents. With Angel and Dominik's registration forms not being with the large tome, was there a chance they were still on the floor of the crypt? She could only hope. Dragging the Chronicle across the plush carpet under the bed reinforced how large it was. There wasn't a chance they could sneak it out of the house. Even if she were to walk out like she owned it, which technically she did, wouldn't it be better if Sebastian didn't know who had taken it? At least this would stop him from targeting the agency for now. She was no clearer when she shuffled out from under the bed, easing the Chronicle quietly after her. Rather than getting to her feet, she stayed where she was, listening for more movement from Sebastian. There wasn't any. Upon looking up at Dominik, she knew why. His face was gray, his expression flat. He must have hit Sebastian with a massive surge of energy to be in this state. Despite this, he still helped Eva to her feet. Unfortunately, his touching her hand caused the energy between them to equalize, leaving them both feeling less than stellar. They couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, let alone a glass palace crawling with vampires. Eva bent down and picked up the large Chronicle, this time needing Dominik's help to straighten. She clasped it to her chest, enjoying the energy coming off the book in waves. It went some way to topping up her lagging reserves, but she had to be careful not to drain the book entirely. If that were to happen, it would become a simple record, rather than the powerful item it truly was. "We need to leave it behind," said Dominik, causing Eva's head to snap up, her grip on the chronicle tightening. Again she was flooded with energy, to where she shoved the chronicle at Dominik, and he took it gingerly. "Where? There's nowhere here that will be safe." Dominik frowned before speaking. "Are you the only one who can sense it as you do?" Eva shook her head. "No, my father can also find it like this. And Georgia, of course. So we could safely hide it in the storage closet where we stuffed the guards, and the chances of anyone finding it are slim?" He had a point, even if thoughts of abandoning the chronicle gripped Eva's heart, leaving it physically hurting. She needed to restore her energy, and so did he. Only then could they return to get the book. After wrapping the chronicle in a towel and stowing it on the top shelf of the storage unit, their departure was easier than Eva could have hoped. The ease with which they'd collected her velvet cloak, and the valet returned with Dominik's car, would have been a letdown if Eva weren't feeling as drained as she was. Part of her was waiting for the other shoe to drop, even though she'd retrieved the gorgeous pair Magda had loaned her. She knew what it was she was waiting for, as soon as she saw the girl lying on the side of the road like a broken doll. Were they in time? Dominik pulled to a stop, the girl illuminated by the car's headlights. Eva was out and next to the girl, her fingers pressed against the carotid artery to confirm what she already knew. Dominik soon joined her. The pair hunkered down, their breathing synchronized. Eva was shaking her head when they were illuminated by headlights from the other direction. This was followed up by a familiar blip and a flash of red and blue coming out of nowhere. It showed that for once, Captain Hugo was on the ball. And her not having heard a vehicle approaching meant he hadn't just arrived either. He'd been parked there. Waiting. But for what? Or was that for whom?
If you've enjoyed these chapters, we'd love it if you could give them a thumbs up. And if you'd like to continue the story, you can subscribe and tap the bell to be notified when the next chapter is released.